to our Resource Conservation 101 webinar, and we're so glad to have you here today. As we get started, we wanted to just go over really quickly some of the GoToWebinar features and functions that you'll be using on the webinar for today. So right now you should have a panel that looks similar to what you see on your screen, and we're going to walk through how to use some of the functions for this presentation. So next slide. Next slide, go ahead. Okay, so a couple quick things before we get into the GoToWebinar functions, just to let you know this is a 2-hour session. If you attended our last Resource Conservation 101 webinar 2 weeks ago, this is the same presentation. So I did recognize a few of the names on there, and I just wanted to make sure that you knew that it would be the same presentation. So this is a no-cost webinar, and we're going to provide some general knowledge about the 4 R's, which are reduce, reuse, recycle, and rot, as well as information on energy efficiency, water conservation, and systems and pollution preventions. And the goal is to basically introduce you to the basics of resource conservation, share with you about the local programs that are available here in San Mateo County, connect you to where you can find out more information, and then as well hopefully enlist you into some of our future Recycleworks Volunteer Academy courses that we're offering, so that we can send you out into your community and help you really make some change with regard to some of the things that we're going to cover, the topics. Next slide. So the speakers we have today, and you have to click through these, and Sue. So the speakers we have today, myself, Judy Gregory with Go20 Strategies. We also have Jackie Falconio, who's going to be speaking on the energy portion, and Andre Johnson, who will be speaking on our water portion. We also have Insoo Lim on the line with the San Mateo County, and we'll be introducing them, each of our speakers, a little bit more in detail as we get further into the presentation. Next slide. So things that we want to cover with you on the GoToWebinar. So first of all, we do have everybody muted as we go through the presentation. This is to make sure that we don't have any background noise. We would like you to stay tuned to the entire presentation, and the system actually monitors the responsiveness and the interactivity and that of the attendees. So one thing that's really important, and you could go through the next slide, Insoo, is that we have everybody muted, and to be able to do that we need people to be inputting their audio pin. So the next slide is going to show a little bit more information on that. So we want you to participate both through audio and visual, and this audio pin that should have popped up on your screen if you logged in through the phone. If you're on through your headset and microphones, there's not an issue, but if you did come in through the telephone, we'd like you to make sure you input that audio pin, because that allows us to mute you if there's any issues with sound in the background. Okay, next slide. This navigation bar will allow you to do a few things that we're going to talk more in detail. Especially, it'll allow you to participate in the polls that we have and to answer some of the questions. So next slide. This is what our polling questions will look like. When we ask you some of these questions, a blue screen will pop up with the answers that you can select. And so we only give you a few seconds to do this. So we ask that everybody figure out their response and click on that. Within 10 seconds, usually about 15 seconds, we'll close the poll. You can go hit enter. And then we're also going to have a segment where we'll ask you to actually provide some feedback, and you're going to do that through the question box. So you'll see down there there's a box that you can expand by hitting on the plus next to the word question, and if we ask you a question, you can go ahead and type that in the response box, and we'll be able to get the answers from there. And then sometimes we will actually give you an opportunity to do Q&A with the presenters, and if you have a specific question that you would like to ask, you can either type it into the question box or you can hit that little hand that you see, and that'll raise your hand, and that will alert us to the fact that you would like to actually ask the presenter a question. So we're going to go ahead and do a practice here with our first polling question. And Bob, I need you to make me so that I can launch the polls. So what we're going to do is we want you to answer a question. What webinar that allows us to monitor and track or mute attendees? Is it the speaker, the laptop, the audio pin, or the telephone? And I'm going to launch a poll right now. And you will have the opportunity to answer that question. You should see it popping up on your screen right now. A couple more people still need to vote. Go ahead and register those votes, and then we will close it. I think there's one more person. All right, we're going to go ahead and close that. So let me share with you the responses. We had a number of people say that it was the laptop and quite a few responses that it was the audio pin, and that's correct. So that gives you an idea of how we're going to work the polling. I'm going to go ahead and hide that and close it. All right, next slide. All right, couple more things. So here's our agenda for the day. We are going to be getting ready to launch into our first segment. We'll do an introduction to the Recycleworks Volunteer Academy first. That'll be brief. It'll be followed by our segment on energy. Then we're going to have our segments on solid waste and recycling, as well as pollution prevention. And finally, we will have our water section and a short wrap-up. So we're going to go ahead and get started. And Sue Lim is going to go ahead and be presenting to us on the Recycleworks Volunteer Academy and how you can get more involved with it.
Great. Thanks, Judy. Can everybody hear me? Judy, can you respond?
Yes, I can hear you perfect.
Okay, great. So hi everyone, my name is Ensu Lim and I'm with Recycleworks of the County of San Mateo. I recently joined Recycleworks, it's been a few months now, to work primarily on the RVA, the Recycleworks Volunteer Academy. It's a great program and I'm very excited to be part of the RVA team. And the RVA is part of the County of San Mateo's Recycleworks program. Recycleworks promotes resource conservation in the county through the development and implementation of many different types of programs, such as our green business program, our construction and demolition program, and schools program. And Recycleworks used to be part of the Public Works Department here at the county, but we've recently merged with the county's Office of Sustainability. And so under the Office of Sustainability, Recycleworks will continue to work with the members of our community and the 20 local jurisdictions to bring our programs to your doorstep. So through the RVA, the Recycleworks program is offering no-cost resource conservation courses to you, the members of the San Mateo County. And the program's goal is basically to educate and train our community members and empower you with the necessary tools and knowledge for you to be able to go back out into your communities to promote resource conservation through volunteerism. And this year's RVA offerings include a few elements, including webinars, 2 8-week in-class courses on resource conservation, compost, and solid waste, as well as single-session workshops. If you can go to the Recycleworks website for more information about these offerings, and of course you can feel free to reach out to me. I'd be more than happy to talk more about these offerings. Okay.
I have mine up, and soon, do you want me to switch to my screen? Because I have mine up.
Sure. Sorry, everybody, about that technical difficulty. Let me switch over.
Okay. I'm going to go ahead and show mine right now.
Okay. Thanks, Judy.
Okay. Let me go back a slide, too. I think you were right there.
Yep, you got it. Actually,
did you want me to go to the next screen? Okay.
Yes, great. And so there are 3 core members of the RVA. Jola Mariano is providing high-level program oversight and direction for the program. Kim Springer in the middle. He is the overall program manager for RVA, and I until him, and I coordinate the day-to-day operations of the program. And we're also working very closely with Cascadia Consulting Group and their team, including Judy here, to develop and implement the RVA program this year. And our team, we're working really hard to make sure that our community members have the opportunity to take full advantage of this great county program. Next slide, please. And that's it. Over to you, Judy.
Okay, great, thanks. So today's webinar, as we talked about, we're going to be covering energy efficiency, solid waste and recycling, water conservation, and water systems and pollution prevention. And to kick it off, we're going to have our first presenter, Jackie Falconio. She is a resource conservation specialist with the County of San Mateo. She graduated from Sonoma State University, where she double majored in energy management design and economics. She focused her studies on the design and practices of energy-efficient buildings while directing her electives toward local government urban planning. She interned at a local nonprofit agency, Solar Sonoma County, and worked at Tesla as a product specialist to assist opening a new store in the Marin County. She's now working for San Mateo County Energy Watch. She's spearheading their zero net energy initiatives into the county by providing trainings and developing a countywide strategic plan. She also assists local school districts to utilize their state funding for energy efficiency projects. So I would like to welcome Jackie Falconio.
Thank you, Judy. Okay. Hi, everyone. Thanks for signing on. If we could go to the next slide. All right. So first, I wanted to start off with who provides our energy. Most people here have PG&E. They provide gas and electric here. The map shows here that there are three major utilities in the state, and PG&E is most of Northern California. They are what's called an investor-owned utility, and they are exclusive service providers. So they are regulated by the California Public Utilities Commission, and they own the generation and distribution infrastructure in California. So what that means, or in their territory. So what that means is all the lines and transfer stations and even the power generating stations in their territory are owned by PG&E, and their major goal is to provide safe and reliable energy at a reasonable price. You can go to the next slide. There we go. This is a brief look at where our power mix comes from, or electricity mix comes from. The graph on the right shows that PG&E actually has a fairly clean electricity sources. So we have more hydro and renewable energy on our grid than California even, and especially more than the U.S. There's really not much coal here in the United States or in California. Next slide. There's also something called a community choice energy, or CCE. Basically what that is community choice energy, they buy energy from a renewable source that's not local, and then they transport it through utilities infrastructure, and your customer can buy energy from this company. So these energy companies, they don't have to input their own infrastructure in the state, which is very expensive and inefficient. If you already have lines going to every household, it's a lot easier to just use that line. So it's a partnership. Okay. So our first question of the energy section is, a utility company, for example PG&E, will encourage you to practice energy efficiency. True or false?
Like we need a few more people to go ahead and register their votes. We've got about half of the people that have already responded, so if you haven't answered the poll, we'll give you a couple more seconds. All right, we only had about half, but I'm going to go ahead and close it and share the responses.
Okay, great. Well, everybody answered true, which is correct, so that is good. We could go to the next slide.
Okay. Sorry about that. Had to hide the poll.
Okay. All right. That's true. Everybody who answered was correct. Our utility companies are what's called decoupled. So decoupled utilities refers to the disassociation of a utility's profits from its sales of energy. So basically what that means is PG&E is not making all their money from getting you to use more energy. So they're highly regulated in California, and what this does is it encourages the utilities to promote energy efficiency. Most of their costs come from maintaining infrastructure that's already in California, so that's what they're charging you for on your energy bill. So for each kilowatt hour that you're using, that charge is basically determined by how much maintenance that is needed on our current infrastructure. And these two graphs here show the effect that energy efficiency has had on the energy usage in California. So on the right, you can see that the energy use per person over time in the United States has continued to go up over the last 35 years. But in California, it's actually stayed relatively flat, which is pretty remarkable, saying that in 1975, nobody had cell phones or computers or iPads. They weren't charging anything. So the fact that our energy use per person is steady really shows how efficient our building and our technology has become. Go to the next slide. So when we talk about energy efficiency, what that means is using less energy to provide the same service. It doesn't mean that you have to give up anything. It's just using less energy to do what you typically do. Next slide. Okay. Meeting future demand. Everybody knows that the population in California has been steadily increasing and will continue to increase over the next decade or so. And the way that we're hoping to supply energy to this future demand is first through energy efficiency. So if we generate the same amount of energy now that we do in 10 or 15 years, everyone will have to be using very efficient products and being very energy efficient in their homes. The second way to fill in this new supply that will be needed is through renewables. So instead of reverting to a new power plant, really promoting solar or other types of renewables on houses so that people are providing their own energy. There's also distributed generation, which is like small plants or production that is connected to the grid. So that would include things like leasing solar. So if you get your solar from SolarCity or Vivint Solar, that would be considered a distributed generation. And then as a last resort, it would be conventional efficient fossil generation. But the utilities really try to go through the first few steps before resulting to generating more through fossil generation, because it's incredibly expensive to put up a new power plant. It's not in the best interest of the utility. Next slide. Funding for energy efficiency. So on every utility bill that you get from PG&E, you have a public goods charge. So normally just around a few dollars. It's not a lot, but that money goes to the California Public Utilities Commission, which is the regulator for all the utilities in California. And they allocate a certain amount of money to each utility that they have to do certain things with this money. So it's not like they're giving the money to PG&E and they have free reign with it. It's very highly regulated and given to specific programs. So PG&E has many energy efficiency programs. My program, the San Mateo County Energy Watch program, is actually funded by PG&E. But they have different programs for commercial, residential, industrial, and agricultural, as well as cities and schools. They provide the funding for those programs. Excuse me. California policy is very pro-energy efficiency and protecting the environment. AB 32, which most people probably have heard about, is our Global Warming Solutions Act. So the original was greenhouse gas emissions to 15% below 2005 levels by 2020. and it was just updated to 80% below 2005 levels by 2050. That was just updated this year. And then we have the Renewable Portfolio Standard, which is mandating that the utility energy mix, so any utility in California, has to have at least 50% renewables by 2030. So that's really encouraging utilities to find ways to connect with renewable sources like solar and wind. They're also enforcing energy efficiencies through our building code. The section of the building code that addresses energy consumption is Title 24. And our goals for California, for residential, all new construction must be zero net energy by 2020. And what that means is that over the course of a year, the building must produce as much energy through renewables as it consumes over the course of a year. And so the commercial goal is all new commercial zero net energy by 2030. So in the next 15 years, all of our new construction will be zero net energy. Can you go to the next slide? Which type of energy do homes in San Mateo County use more of, electricity or natural gas?
Okay, I just went ahead and launched that.
Thank you. Give you a couple.
And I apologize for the pop-ups. I had to reboot my computer right before we got on, and I didn't get a chance to close those out. So you might continue to see those. Just try and ignore those. We have about half of the people that have voted. There's a few more of you that want to get your vote in real quick, just so you know. We don't count them against you if you get them wrong, so we prefer just to go ahead and register that. Okay, I'm going to close it.
Okay.
And there are your answers.
Okay, great. So it's very, very similar to the guests on our last webinar. If we can go to the next slide, we will show that actually most of our energy comes from natural gas in San Mateo County. The main reason for this is typically other places in the country, your biggest electricity usage is through air conditioning. And here on the peninsula, we don't have to worry too much about that. We have some of the most mild weather in the world, so that doesn't show up in our energy consumption. So it's about 60% of our energy comes from natural gas, which includes heating. Go to the next slide. So energy use in your homes. What uses natural gas versus electricity? Large majority of your appliances and technologies all run on electricity. However, your heaters and any sort of like a gas stove, those would be run on natural gas. So there's not too many items that run on natural gas, but the ones that do are high users. So they use a lot more natural gas than you would with electricity on everything else in your home. We could go to the next slide. What are the most cost-effective upgrades to save energy in your home? So I'd love it if we could have people type in what your initial response would be into the chat box. And sometimes it's great for me to see what you think as a cost-effective upgrade to save energy in your house would be.
Right, and actually it's not the chat box. I need to update the slide. It's the question. So if you want to put your answers into the question box. I don't see that anybody has put anything in yet. Looking to see if anybody's
Take a wild guess.
Okay. Oh, okay, we have some. So Windows, energy efficient light bulbs,
okay.
LED light bulbs. Those are the answers that popped up.
Those are the most common answers that I get as well. So if we could go to the next slide, I will show you the 10 most cost-effective energy-saving upgrades for your home. These are things that people often don't think about. So duct sealing is the most cost-effective energy-saving upgrade that you can do. You don't see it, nobody really hears about it, but it's incredibly useful. And attic insulation, insulating hot water heaters. Insulation is huge. It's estimated that about 30 to 35% of all of the heat that we generate in our house with our heaters leaves our house through mistakes in your insulation, so small little gaps. So basically you have to produce 130% of heat that you need in your house because you're going to be losing so much of it. So insulation is huge. Lighting is very good. I mean, the LEDs are great and they do last a long time. So that cost over a period of time is great, but you're going to see a lot more savings when you're looking at the actual infrastructure of your building. Okay, so we can go to the next slide. Home energy factors. So there's really three main factors that affect your energy consumption in your home or building. Your home itself, how it's constructed, your energy assets, so that's heaters, air conditioning, appliances, insulation, windows, and then you have your stuff. So everybody has, their phone and their phone charger and computers and TVs and all those things that are plugged in all the time, and that really affects your energy consumption, obviously. And then your behavior. You may have the really energy efficient, dryer, but if you leave the lights on in your house all day while you're gone, you're not going to see the savings on your energy bill that you were expecting. We can go to the next slide. Okay. So in San Mateo County, we have some residential energy efficiency programs. Oh, go back. One more.
Sorry about that. It just, I hit it a couple times. And it's,
That's all right.
Let's go back. I'll get there. You can go.
Okay.
If you want to talk about, I'll get there. It's going slow.
Here we go. Okay. So there are some energy efficiency programs available to you here in the county. There are different programs and rebates available for your level of income, and then also for any HOAs. There's lighting, single family and multifamily. There's also some rebates as well. So on this slide we have the rebates through PG&E, my program, the San Mateo County Energy Watch, and then Energy Upgrade California, which is also kind of run through BayREN, Bay Area Regional Energy Network. And these are great programs that provide a lot of resources for rebates or any upgrades that you may be doing to your home. They also put on trainings, kind of like this one, about energy efficiency in your home and what you can do as a homeowner or even as a renter, what you can do in your space to be more energy efficient. Okay, here we go. So this is just describing how your rates work with PG&E, and this is going to be changing in the future. It hasn't changed yet, but in 2016 it will be. So right now there's a tier system. So any energy that you use up and through tier 1 will be about 13 cents, and then you'll hit a certain amount of energy use. Let's say, 150 kilowatt hours. That's not what it is, but then from 150 to 300, that's tier 2, and then for that amount of energy you're charged 15 cents. And then if you use more than, say, 300, you move into tier 3, and that's 32 cents. So really, the more energy you use later in your bill period will be a lot more expensive. I mean, 3 times as expensive as your energy that you used in the beginning of the month. And then next year, it's going to be changing to a 2-tier system with lower rates. So why focus on efficiency? I get the comment a lot that, well, I don't need to, I don't need to have all those fancy things on my house. I'll just put solar on my roof. The problem with that, though, is that you're going to need a huge system, and a lot of times you don't have the roof space to have a system that will provide all of your energy. So this slide shows 2 different homes. Home A is an average build, nothing anything efficient about it, really. And the average energy use is about 6,000 kilowatt hours. In order to get the energy that you need from solar, it's going to cost you almost $20,000, and you're going to need 450 square feet of roof space. In San Mateo County especially, not many homes have that much space, so you wouldn't even be able to fit it on your household. However, Home B, your efficient build, which only uses about half the energy that your average build would use, your approximate cost is less than $10,000, and you only need 200 square feet of roof space, which is a lot more doable here. So it's really important to focus on efficiency first. Next slide. Resources. So here are some great websites that I recommend you check out for any more information about energy efficiency programs or resources in the county. The Recycleworks website is great. San Mateo County Energy Watch, the City County Association of Government, CCAG, who is my program's partner, Energy Upgrade, and BayRen. They have a lot of rebates for residential and multifamily. And then the PG&E website, the My Energy, you can really track your energy consumption and look at when you're using the most energy and try and figure out how you can minimize that. So that is it for energy. Let me know if you have any questions. Put them into the question box, I think.
Right, and if you want to raise your hand, if anybody actually wants to ask a question, you can raise your hand. I'm looking to see if anybody has put anything in there. It takes a few seconds for it to register. I don't see any questions coming up. I don't see any hand raises. Okay, I'll give everybody, we're a little bit ahead of schedule, which is great, so give everybody a few seconds to see if anything pops up. Okay, yeah. Great. Well, did you have anything else you wanted to share, Jackie? We are a few minutes ahead of schedule. So.
I don't think so. If anybody has any specific questions, I'm sure my email can go out, or check out the San Mateo County Energy Watch website, and we have a contact on the website that I will monitor. So if you come up with any questions late tonight or something like that, feel free.
And we just Bob, I would suggest too you might want to take a moment to go through the areas of the website that might be of interest to people if we're a little ahead of schedule and have some time.
I don't know if we're that ahead of schedule. So we have about 2 minutes. I don't know. I did get a question come through though. What is the phone number for energy efficiency assessments? Do you have that, or is that something we can send to them afterwards?
Yeah, assessments for homes or businesses. So my program primarily works with small businesses. For energy assessments, we do provide a free energy assessment for small businesses, but not for residential. For residential, I would recommend looking at BayRen or Home Energy Upgrade California. They have more of the residential assessments and rebates.
Okay, great. And that's she was interested in home. And then just to let you know as well that this topic, in fact, let me go ahead and close this out, and I'll advance to the next slide.
Yeah.
Right.
So my email.
You know what? Let me go back. I'm going to go back to that slide if anybody wants to copy that down for a second, and we'll make sure to get you a copy of the PowerPoint. And just so you know, there is a handout down at the bottom of your box that if you want to click on the link in the handouts, I believe that it has a lot of the links to the websites that have been introduced in this presentation for more information. So you can click on the handouts and download that. And then what I wanted to let you know is that if this is a topic that is of interest to you and you do want to take a deeper dive and find out more information, well then we've got the perfect course for you. We actually are launching our Master Resource Conservation course. It starts on January 20th. It will be for 8 consecutive weeks from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. And Laura McCoyne is going to be teaching that. She's actually on the call with us today as well, so hopefully we'll have a few minutes at the end, and if you guys have any questions for her, we can open that up. But the course will be at the Burlingame Main Library, and if you're interested in signing up for that class, you can click on the recycleworks.org website, which I'll show you a little bit more about that website towards the end of the session, and you can register for this class. Okay? All right. Okay, so good timing. I'm going to be launching the next segment. So our next topic, we're going to be focusing on solid waste and recycling. So just a little bit about myself. My name is Judy Gregory, and I'm with Go20 Strategies. I'm contracted through Cascadia and Recycleworks Volunteer Academy to help put together some of this programming. So I worked in the solid waste and recycling field for over 25 years. I primarily help businesses and communities around the state in implementing zero waste strategies, and more recently I've spent a lot of time in developing curriculum and training related to zero waste for organizations. So basically the stuff that we're going to be talking about today is sort of a passion for me, and I'm excited to just share a little bit of the basics, and then we can talk about how you can find out more information if it's a topic that you're really interested in. Okay. So let me get to this. Okay, so first we're going to talk about what is solid waste and what are the things that we're throwing away, because oftentimes we associate things we throw in the trash with the term waste, that it's a waste. But when you look at what's going in the trash, that isn't really the case. You look at what's going into the landfills, you look what's going to incinerators, and there's durable goods, there's appliances, there's electronics, there's paper, there's clothing, there's containers, there's packaging, there's food waste, there's construction and demolition waste. There's all sorts of these things that are in there that actually have a value. They may not have a value to us anymore, and they've sort of become rendered invaluable to us, but they have a value, especially if we switch our mindset away from wasting and disposal to what we call SRM, or Sustainable Resource Management. Because what these things are resources if they're in a system that focuses on materials as resources and not as waste. So today we're going to be talking about all these aspects, including how is waste created, what are some of the national and local trends on disposal. We're going to take a look at landfills and the role that they play, as well as how they've evolved. And finally, we're going to talk about this resource management, or SRM, including reducing, reusing, recycling, composting, and how they all play a role in zero waste. So the first thing that we need to understand is that in nature, there is no waste. So on the Earth, everything happens in cycles, and our Earth is this closed loop system where no waste naturally occurs, and that's the important piece of it. There's no away in nature, and our Earth naturally uses waste byproducts from one system to fuel another system. So waste is a creation of human culture and coming together in communities, and we've ultimately created systems to process these wastes that we have created. But in an SRM system, or Sustainable Resource Management system, we can try to mimic nature by having things like metal, waste, scrap metal, can create new tin cans, new metal. We can create things with it. We can repair things like bicycles so that instead of throwing them away, they're a resource for somebody who needs a bike. And even things like food scraps can become a nutrient-rich soil compost that can help for our agricultural industry. So that's what we're talking about when we talk about a resource management system, is not looking at things at waste, but looking at a circular system to where they come back and they have a purpose in that system. So how is garbage created? Well, the waste are leftovers that we dispose of, but as I said earlier, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's garbage. So we all have things that we don't need, things that have lost their value to us, but in an SRM system, we use those as feedstocks to basically replenish other needs that we have in the system. So the Environmental Protection Agency estimates that 75% of the American waste stream is actually recyclable, but we only recycle about 30% of it. So when we recycle, when these recyclable, reusable, and compostable materials actually get thrown into the garbage and they go into the trash truck and they're compacted and mixed together, what happens is they're so degraded by that process that then we can't actually effectively reuse, recycle, or compost them. So that's why we say the process of actually throwing away and compacting these materials is what creates the waste, and we want to try and avoid that. So what does waste look like? Well, on a national level, we are sorry, I had the wrong slide. We are generating about 250 million tons a year, and that's according to the U.S. EPA, and this is from a 2012 report that they did. So of that, we have about 29 million tons each year that we compost. We have another 87 million tons that we recycle, and that represents only about less than 35% of all the material that we generate. So the rest of it is either sent waste to energy or landfilled, okay? And so this is the magnitude of what's happening on a national level, and these are the materials that are going to waste to energy and landfill that we want to reallocate in this SRM, our Sustainable Resource Management System. On a local level, the county, here in the county of San Mateo County, residents produce about 4.01 pounds of waste per day. That's based on a 2013 number. But overall, since 2004, the countywide disposal has declined about 31%. So that's really great. Let's see, it's a total of about 543,000 pounds generated on the county in 2013, which was slightly higher than the year before, but definitely lower from the peaks that we saw. And this just gives you an idea of how San Mateo County falls into that per person generation as compared to some of the other local counties and as compared to California. So when compared to California, it's lower than the statewide average. Compared to some of the other counties in the Northern California area, it's slightly above, but Northern California is amazingly aggressive and really done some great things. So, and then this is just a look at some of the actual cities within the county and how they're doing. To give you an idea, you can see there's various pounds per day disposal on the population throughout the communities. And so this just gives you an idea that the ones in yellow have all reached their targets. So each city within the state of California has a target established by the state as far as what they need to reach on a pounds per day disposal of the population, and they monitor that constantly at the state, and the cities have to report back that information, and they have to implement new programs and create strategies on how they're going to reach that target through the state. So this gives you an idea that the cities in yellow have all not only reached their goal, but they have dramatically reduced their pounds per day disposal. So there is an organization called As You Sow, and they look at a number of environmental issues. And one of the things that they recently did was do a report on our waste stream, and they note that we're currently throwing away $11.4 billion worth of recyclables each year in the landfill. And they say that it represents about 40% of the waste stream. So as you can see, it's not just trash, it's not just valueless material going into landfills, it's an estimated $11.4 billion of material that we're throwing away that has this value. Oop. Let me go to the next slide. What happened? I think my slide's behind. Sorry about that. Uh-oh. I hope my computer just didn't freeze. Oh, wait. Sorry about that. Okay, my computer just froze. I think it's coming back up. So I'm going to talk for a few minutes, and hopefully that will pop back up. But basically, the recycling rate of materials, and I see it coming back up, so we'll give it a second, but I'll talk about the recycling rate of highly recyclable materials in California and throughout just the nation in general are quite low. So we have a large number of highly recyclable materials such as metals, such as plastics that could easily be recyclable, yet our recycling rates aren't where they should be. And so looking at how we can increase recycling rates, not just in general across the board, but looking at specific materials that have high recyclability, and that that systems could be put in place. And one of the things that we also like to look at is not just the materials that are highly recyclable, but we also want to take into consideration the materials that are toxic and detrimental to the environment. So it's one thing to get recyclables out of the landfill and to find a way to incorporate them back into new products, but we also want to make sure that we're eliminating toxins and reducing products that could be harmful to the environment. So let me see, I think this is just giving you an idea of some of those products. Obviously, we know that plastic, a huge detriment to ocean pollution and waterway systems. So even though they may not be toxic as a plastic, but they're very toxic to our environment. And then electronics is another one. They contain lots of heavy metals, so making sure that those are being properly reused and recycled is important. So the next section that I'm going to get into is I want to talk about some of just the key legislation that's happening here in California and locally as well. So California has been just amazing at the type of environmental policy that it's enacted across the board related to recycling and waste, energy, water, all of that. There's some very landmark sort of historical legislation that has passed over the recent years in California that I think it's great for you just to have a little bit of background. So AB 939 is that big one. That's sort of the one that got the whole ball rolling and started all of this. And what that passed back in 1989, and what the goal was is that by the year 1995, all communities in California would have diverted 25% of the material originally going to landfills to alternate uses, and by 2000 that we would reduce 50% of all materials going to landfills. So that was just such an amazing piece of legislation, and thanks to that legislation, California has been able to really sort of surpass a number of other states in implementing recycling initiatives, and it's one of the reasons that we have our curbside recycling programs and recycling centers and a lot of that stuff. So very historic. The other piece of legislation that's really big, and these next three on the slide are all more recent pieces of legislation. So we worked with AB 939 for years, and we've done a lot of great things, but it was definitely time to push the envelope and go to the next level. So AB 341, what we refer to as our mandatory recycling law, basically requires that all businesses that throw away more than 4 cubic yards a week of waste and all apartments with 5 or more units must have a recycling program in place. And that just passed back in 2011, and it was to be launched in 2012. So I think a lot of people have probably started to see many of the programs going into place and more businesses starting to participate in recycling and more multi-family recycling programs. And just the community sort of focusing on that. Another historic piece of legislation, which Jackie brought up earlier, which was AB 32, the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Act. Most of the issues associated with that act are related to energy reductions to save energy through energy use in the state. However, there is a piece of the legislation that requires that 5 million metric tons of the CO2 reductions that the state will enact have to be through the reduction of waste going into landfills. Because what they recognized is that the emissions from the landfills were directly responsible for a large portion of not only the environmental pollution, but the greenhouse gases that were being created and generated in the atmosphere. So, and primarily due to organics. So that piece of legislation led to the AB 341 mandatory recycling, and now it's also led to another historic piece of legislation which will go into effect in 2016, which is our AB 1826. That's our mandatory organics recycling, and we're all very excited. There's lots of stuff going on because of this piece of legislation right now, which, similar to AB 341, this piece of legislation will require all businesses generating 8 cubic yards a week or more of organics, or apartments doing the same, that they would participate in an organics recycling program. So really exciting, and I'm sure that you will see a lot of activity related to that piece of legislation in your local community. So we're going to go ahead and do a polling question. The question is, which of the following would not be considered solid waste in a solid waste system? So is it food scraps, diapers, styrofoam packaging, or industrial chemical byproduct? Go ahead and launch that for you. If we could get a few more people to just quickly register their vote, and then I'll go ahead and shut down that poll, and we're going to move on to our next segment. Anybody else want to go ahead and register a vote? All right, I am going to go ahead and close it. Let me share the results. So it looks like we had about 60% of people say food scraps and 40% say the industrial chemical byproduct. So when we talk about solid waste, we predominantly are talking about materials that go into landfills. So food scraps do go into landfills. In fact, they're actually one of the largest segments of material currently being disposed. Diapers, styrofoam packaging, all of those things are things that do end up in landfills and incinerators. Industrial chemical byproducts are actually handled through the Department of Toxic Substances and other mechanisms. They don't get thrown into landfills. They did at one point, but they no longer do. So we do not consider them part of our solid waste stream, and we don't track them in our solid waste reporting. And I see that there's a question, so let me see if I'm going to look really quick and see if it's something. Yes, the pounds per day is residential only. So that was a question asking if that pounds per day generation, it is based on a population number. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and launch into our next segment, which is just some landfill basics. It's really important to kind of understand the dynamics of landfilling and how they affect our system. So there actually is evidence of the creation of waste going back to the time of hunters and gatherers, you know, back when man began to congregate in small villages and communities, but we didn't have landfills. We didn't have those types of systems in place. We also have information going back to the Mayan civilizations and Native American civilizations that actually showed that they created quite a bit waste. In fact, the Native American study shows that there was 5.3 pounds a day of waste that was being created. Obviously, we didn't have the population that we do now. But it wasn't really until about 500 BC that the idea of municipal dumps came into play, and it was back in Athens, Greece, where they actually started requiring people to dump waste at least a mile outside of the cities. And then we don't see a lot of information in historical documents relating to waste. Really, when we start to notice issues, it's in the 1800s when Americans began to industrialize here, and there were lots of small towns and cities. At that time, the practice was just to throw trash into the streets. Animals would eat a lot of leftover food, and so as we started to congregate and form these small towns, though, the waste became too much for sort of the environment itself to absorb, and lots of things happened. Disease, that was a big part of it. The bubonic plague, typhoid fever, things like that created from these unsanitary conditions in the cities. And so it was really around the 1800s that local government really began to recognize that they needed to put policies in place to manage the issue of waste. We actually didn't have our first modern sanitary landfill in the United States until 1934, and it actually opened up right here in California in Fresno. But up until that time, there were various different things that we used, such as open dumps, fire pits, the problems that you have fires, you have odors, you have vermin, things like that. So we had our more recent modern day legislation came into place in the 1980s, where the Resource Conservation and Recycling Act was passed. that basically started to mandate a lot of things, such as landfills that would be covered, that would be lined, and to really start putting that framework in place so that we're not polluting the environment that we were, the way that we were. Locally, the landfill that's predominantly used in San Mateo County is Ox Mountain. It's owned by Republic Services. It's actually been a lined landfill since 1993, so prior to that, it wasn't. It has a leachate system that collects nearly 30,000 gallons per day of leachate, which is treated. It also has 1,700 poplar trees on site, which actually use the leachate as their water source. So that's another way to use that. And then it currently has 191 acres to be permitted as a landfill, even though the full site is 2,700 acres. And there's about 40 more acres left, which is where we get the point that it should be open until about 2040. It takes in all sorts of material from the local area, including solid waste, including construction and demolition. It also does take in some special waste such as soil and sludges, and they're permitted to take in hazardous waste at the site as well. So they use seagulls to help with the vector control, and hawks. They use hawks to help with the seagull control on the site, which is pretty neat to see if you've ever toured landfills to see how they do that. And they have an energy collection system that's operated by Amerisco, and they basically collect energy and they supply it to nearly 12,000 homes in Alameda and Palo Alto. Other local facilities used in the area are the Hay Road Landfill in Vacaville and Newbie Island Sanitary Landfill. And then there's a number of transfer stations which take in material and then they ship it out to more distant landfills that are used in the county. And I'll provide you some information a little bit later on how you can access information on local landfills. So the issue with landfills, and one of the key reasons why we've put a lot of focus more recently on getting organics out of landfills and reducing the material going in, are two primary components that are created, methane and leachate. So methane is basically a greenhouse gas that is produced from the decomposition of the organic material when they are controlled in an anaerobic condition, which is basically deprived of air. So the methane is released and it goes into the atmosphere. The leachate is a soupy mix that is from the liquids in the landfill that go down to the bottom. So one is released up into the environment through the air. The other one goes down into the through the soil, into the water tables, and ultimately into our groundwater. So one of the key drivers for zero waste in California, and that's a newer term that you've probably started to hear, we use it somewhat synonymously with sustainable resource management, but zero waste is a connection to reducing the greenhouse gas emissions, and we say that it's ultimately connected to the issue of climate change and global warming, and scientists have been documenting the connection between these greenhouse gases and landfills for about 20 years. So the issue is that, as I said, the landfills create methane. So methane is a greenhouse gas. Methane is about 72 times more potent than carbon dioxide. And carbon dioxide is also a greenhouse gas. It's usually what we measure. It's our standardized measure for greenhouse gas. So when we talk about greenhouse gas emissions and the emission levels, we're usually referring to it as in measurement terms of carbon dioxide. Well, methane doesn't last as long in the atmosphere as carbon dioxide. It only lasts about 20 years, but it's more potent while it's here. So that's where we arrive at the number that methane is 72 times more potent than carbon dioxide over a 20-year horizon of the lifespan. And that's why it's so important that we reduce the methane levels through the reduction of organics in landfills. Okay, going to my next slide. All right, and then leachate. So as I said, leachate is a liquid that is eliminated through the usually unlined landfills. So most of our landfills now, current ones are lined, but in the past they weren't. Older landfills, especially those built near waterways, were tremendously affected by the leachate that would start to leak. And what leaks out of a landfill can definitely vary on the age of the landfill, the type of landfill, and the material. So if you have an older landfill that at one point was taking a lot of toxic materials, especially those with chemicals and heavy metals, and then the liquid is mixing with that, you have all of that going into the water system below, which is why it's such a huge contaminant and why it's so important. What we'll talk about a little bit later is I will go onto the website and I'll show you where you can find information about your local collection for waste and recyclables. I'll show you how to find out who your hauler is, what they accept, and what are some of the special programs that are offered in the county. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and launch another poll. And let me pull this up. How many times more potent is methane as a greenhouse gas as opposed to CO2? Okay, we've got a few of you. Need a couple more to vote, and we're going to close it. Ooh, we got everybody. All right. So let me share. We had 86% of the people say that it's 72 times more potent, and we had 14% say 20. So yes, the correct answer is 72 times more potent. And again, it's just a reason why it's so important for us to reduce the amount of materials going into landfills. Okay. My computer's trying to catch up with me, so give me a section. Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit more about what are some of the things that we can do. So this is kind of the fun part. I want you to think about a few things as I'm going through this section because there will be some slides at the end where I ask you to provide some responses. So start to think about as we go through this, what are some of the personal things you can change? What are some of the things that you're doing in your life, in your, throwing away in your trash can that you want to eliminate that are challenging for you? What are some of the R's that you could do in your own home or office to make some changes? So have those questions in the back of your mind as we're kind of going through this next section. So we've kind of learned that in nature there's no waste, but in modern society we're obviously generating and disposing of resources on a daily basis. So we want to think about how do these products and packaging, and agricultural products and all of these materials fit into a resource management system. My slide again was a little bit behind me. So here's where I would like you to type one of those questions into your question box, not your chat box. But why don't you share something that you regularly throw away that you would like to figure out how to eliminate or find an alternate product or use for it that would reduce the amount of waste you're creating. So you can type it in now. I'll check the question box frequently and we'll get some of those ideas, and maybe by the end of this section we might have some more answers for it. Okay, so I was looking to see if anybody had posted anything. I'll go back to the chat box in a little bit. So post those as you think of them. Okay, so the SRM hierarchy. We talked about SRM as a sustainable resource management. But when we talk about terms, I want to first bring up three terms that we pretty much all know and use. Reduce, reuse, recycle. And those are part of our SRM system. This phrase was coined back in Earth Day in 1970, and basically it's come to represent sort of it's the cornerstone of our growing environmental movement, reduce, reuse, and recycle. But we need to focus on the order that these words are, because I think most of us are really familiar with the recycle piece of it, and we don't pay so much attention to the reduce and the reuse. But truthfully, there's a reason why we have reduce and reuse first and not recycle, because of their importance in the system. And then, of course, we have this new term. We've added the fourth R in recent years, which is rot. Really is composting, but you can't have 3 R's and a C. So our 4 R's, we add rot. And that one has become very important and will continue to be a very important piece of the system as we progress with a lot of the programs that are going on. So think about maybe some other R's that you might have that could help us in our SRM system and help us individually make changes. Okay, next slide. Okay, so we're going to talk about the waste reduction first. So reduce, also known as waste reduction, is first on the hierarchy. And the reason for this is because that what we found is that waste reduction is the best way to eliminate disposal. If we don't create waste in the first place, if we reduce it, then we don't have to recycle it, we don't have to find alternative uses for it. We just haven't created it in the first place. And actually we found that that's usually the way that we can save the most money as well, because when we're paying for things to ultimately throw them away, we're wasting our money. So waste reduction is so important both in personal and business applications, and that's why we like to focus on that first. So some of the things that we can do is reduce commercial packaging. How many times do you see a huge package for a small product? It's for marketing purposes, and so we really need to reduce commercial packaging. We need to implement policies regarding purchasing that puts an emphasis on waste reduction first. We also need to look at redesigning products that eliminate toxins and that use less material, that use recyclable materials, that are remanufacturable, that are durable, that are long-lasting, that support a sustainable resource management system. And then with those products that we ultimately can't find other uses for, that are problematic in our system, we just need to look at banning those altogether. Styrofoam is a perfect example of that. So some of the things we can do to eliminate waste, obviously sustainable gardening and landscaping is a great way, grass cycling. We eliminate waste when we do things like have energy saving measures in place. Eliminating disposable. I mean, how many people use paper plates and cups in their home because they don't want to wash them? So we want to move away from that, look at durable products, and then even looking at the cleaning products that we use that don't leave a footprint on our environment when we're done. So those are some things. And then reuse, it's not something that's new to us. Reuse is popular. It's been around for years and years and years. I mean, we can all remember back to, you know, maybe a grandmother that made quilts out of old, you know, jeans or shirts, or, you know, you probably got, when you moved away to college or something, you got the couch or the TV, because that sort of built-in reuse of materials has been around. So when we think of traditional reuse, we think of thrift shops and repair shops, garage sales, and swap meets, things that we've all sort of grown up with. But now there's this new glamorous look to reuse that's bringing it back and reinforcing the importance and the need for that. So modern reuse, one of the biggest companies in the world is built around reuse. So eBay is great, FreeCycle, Craigslist, and then other things like street banks are starting to become more popular, where you can actually share items that you have that you don't necessarily use a lot with your neighbors. And then recycling and composting, we consider them basically the same in the SRM system. Recycling is usually with products, whereas composting is with organics, but they do the same thing. They turn that material into something else. And it's very important. It's sort of that thing that the public grasps onto. They feel like they can make a tangible change when you recycle something and you put it in a recycle bin. So it's very popular with the public, and sort of that buy-in from the local community. So the process of recycling is where we take a product and we do something to it to transform it into a new product. And the great thing about it is that it not only saves natural resources, but usually there's a huge energy savings associated with recycling as well. So when we take an aluminum can and we recycle it into a new aluminum can, that saves 92% of the original energy versus mining the ore and going through the whole process of creating aluminum can from virgin materials. So we have a lot of local community programs around recycling. Composting, you can usually do that in your home now. A lot of the communities have added food to the composting. Traditionally it was mostly the grass, leaves, and branches, and now you see a lot more communities adding food waste to that. Other things that we can do is we compost our sewage sludge. We can take animal and agricultural byproducts and we can compost them, and we can actually collect the energy from these. So it creates a biofuel that's able to go into the energy system, the energy grid, and then we take the actual solid byproduct and we can land apply it. We can also compost in aerobic windrows such as this. And then, like I said, the biofuel, we can collect the gas. So lots of things that we can do. Okay, so now I talked about chatting with us. If you guys have an R term that you think is important in eliminating waste, go ahead and put that. I'm going to check our chat box and see what are a few things that have come up. So some of the things that people would like to eliminate from their home, chip bags, granola bars and wrappers, plastic food containers, vacuum cleaner waste that has dust, yogurt containers, toxic home construction materials, and water bottles. So lots of great things that you guys were coming up with that you would like to eliminate. And then we had someone provide another R, which is a great R, refuse. So important. If you buy a product, or if there's something that you use on a regular basis, and you just go to retailers and let them know that, you know what, until this product is packaged sustainably, I'm not going to buy it. I'm going to choose to buy other products that are more sustainable. So looking at our purchasing products, our purchasing practices and the products that we purchase, it sends signals to manufacturers and suppliers and retailers. That's so important. So we really need to put our buck in where we purchase our products. Rotting, yep, composting was a good one. So if you guys have any more other R's that you want to come up with, that would be great. And then a lot of the materials that you guys came up with, what we do with them. So vacuum cleaner waste, I have a feeling that could probably be composted. I would have to do a little bit more looking into that. Chip bags, granola bars, wrappers, things like that. Yes, there is a lot of issue with those not being recyclable, and a lot of things that the EPA has been looking at, especially with regards to life cycle analysis. So we know that we can't eliminate packaging altogether. We do need it to protect the safety of our food and to make sure that our food has shelf life if we're eating packaged food to begin with. But things that we can look at is eating more holistically, shopping at local markets, making more of our food. But on the end of those wrappers where we do need them, EPA is looking at life cycle analysis and saying that some of these products may not be recyclable, but overall their impact on the environment is still less, even though they get thrown into a landfill or get incinerated, because maybe there's less material that goes into producing them, less water, less energy. So not just looking at packaging as a whole that can be recyclable, but looking at the total impact of the packaging, whether it's reusable, recyclable, or not. Okay, so we had a few more things pop up. I had a lot of questions, but I'm going to go ahead and move on because we're just going to be ending this segment, and we're going to be moving into the next segment. So a couple quick things. So for some other R's, reduce, reuse, recycle, and respect our environment, reuse it, reduce it, refuse it, rot it, recycle it. Lots of great ways that you can use the R's to create engaging education for people, for children, repair it, refill it, reinvent it, rethink it, retool it. So finding out how we can use these R's to make change is so important. And then one other term I talked about, zero waste. When we talk about reduce, reuse, recycle, and compost, we're generally looking at that now and we're saying those are the components to zero waste, and zero waste is where we want to go. It is achievable. We have lots of industries where we look at, you know, zero injuries, zero defects. So figuring out that we need to create products in a system that is looking at waste first and not thinking of it as something that comes after is so important. And one other thing before we end the segment is closing the loop. So you might hear that term used a lot, and it's a part of a zero waste system. It's part of a sustainable resource management system. So basically closing the loop means that there is no way for our products. We need to prevent the waste by better designing them and better utilizing our resources. We want to make sure that we have a resource management system integrated into that. We want to reduce the extraction of resources. And when we do that, we take this sort of linear system where there's an input and then the output is ultimately materials being disposed in a landfill. So you can see on the top you have the raw material extraction, you have materials going into processing, they're becoming products, they're being distributed. Ultimately we're using them and throwing them away, but there's another way we can recycle them, send them back through the system. Some of these materials can be reused, and ultimately these materials can go back into the manufacturing of products, and we want to create that system where it's a circular system versus a linear system. All right, so our last question. In a closed loop system, what part of the process is generally eliminated or reduced? I'm going to go ahead and launch this. You guys want to go ahead and register your answers. We need a few more people to go ahead, and even if you don't know, just go ahead and pick an answer. We'll go over it a couple more, a few more seconds. All right. Okay, so it looks like 67% of the people said raw material extraction, which is actually the right answer. Product packaging is definitely in a closed loop system something that we want to reduce or eliminate, but it's usually not totally eliminated because we do need packaging for, like I said, safe handling and transport of products. But raw material extraction is the thing that ultimately we would love to get to that we can do through a circular system. All right. Okay, so I don't see any questions popping up right now. I'm going to do the next segment, which is on pollution prevention. This is a very short segment, so I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and launch into the pollution prevention. It ties in very heavily with resource management and recycling. And let me hide this. And then if you have any questions for me, we can go ahead and cover those at the end before our last speaker. So what is pollution prevention, or for short we call it P2? Basically it's the reducing or eliminating of waste at the source. We want to promote the use of non-toxic and less toxic substances, implementing conservation techniques for these type of materials, and then reusing materials rather than putting them into the waste stream. And most importantly, we want to ensure that there's adequate and convenient collection for these toxic substances. And that's one of the biggest issues, is that California estimates that only about 10% of household hazardous waste are actually disposed of properly in California. So, you know, understanding which materials and which products do pose an environmental threat, and then making sure that people know how to dispose of them properly and where they can do that is so important. We also need to make sure that there's adequate legislation to look at these materials as well, because when they're not handled properly, obviously we recognize that they do pose an environmental threat. So with that, there's quite a few pieces of legislation in California, and I'm not going to go into depth on these, but I do want to touch on them quickly. But California has been very aggressive at implementing a number of what we call producer responsibility or product stewardship policies in place that look at these materials that are problematic to the environment and identify how we can create systems that will ensure that they can get collected and either recycled or disposed. So the bottle bill is one of them. That was passed in 1986, and I'm sure most of you are very familiar with the fact that we have a fee on beverage containers in California, and that fee then has created an infrastructure. The money that's collected through that fee, some of it is redeemed through returning those materials, but there's a ton of money that's not redeemed that has built an infrastructure and helps fund systems to collect these bottles. So it's really created this great infrastructure where people, you know, instead of littering, because that was the issue, beverage containers were found in streets and all over the place, littering the environment. So this bill has helped create a system where people have an incentive to not do that, but to recycle them. Electronic waste, SB 20, is another important one. We saw a huge amount of growth in electronics over the years, and that is not stopping. Those electronics contain toxins and heavy metals that, when disposed in the landfill, pose a huge threat. So we want to keep those out of the landfill. Paint is another one. Carpet is actually a big one. And then mattresses. So some of these pose more of an environmental threat from the fact that they release toxins into the environment. Others pose an environmental threat through litter and pollution. So when we talk about pollution prevention, we're combining both aspects of that. Locally, there are a number of policies in San Mateo County looking at pollution prevention. There are a lot of communities that have adopted zero waste, many communities and even the state that have adopted plastic bag ordinances, polystyrene, otherwise known as styrofoam ordinances, so that local fast food chains in many communities now cannot use styrofoam in the food that you take out. There are some bottled water ordinances, and most recently a lot of communities have adopted safe drug disposal ordinances. So I'm going to actually highlight a few of these. So what is the issue with plastic bags? Well, there's 20 billion single-use plastic grocery bags in California that a lot of them are ending up either littered in the water, or you see them along the highways, or ending up in landfills. So since the plastic never biodegrades, it just breaks down into these smaller and smaller particles that basically are a huge pollutant to the environment. We obviously recognize the need to reduce those. So San Mateo County did pass a reusable bag ordinance that went into effect in 2013 that affects retail stores, except for restaurants. And so basically, get those reusable bags, keep them in your car. At first it's a little inconvenient and you forget, but then you start to get used to it, and it really is the best practice for the environment. It's such a simple thing that you can do, is just to refuse the bag at the grocery store and either have your own. The pharmaceutical, basically we estimate that 389 million used sharps each year are being generated. A lot of those are thrown into landfills, but now with more and more systems to sort trash and sort recyclables, they end up in the recycle bins, and they can pose a risk to sanitation workers. They pose a risk when they end up going down the toilet, down the, somewhere into the water system. So water treatment facility operators have a risk associated with them. The drugs themselves ending up going down into our water system are creating issues. They're going into the oceans. So the whole issue related to pharmaceuticals and the safe disposal of them when we're done with them has just grown And San Mateo County actually passed its ordinance just this year, and so you're probably starting to see a lot more programs at the pharmacy and Sharps, and many more communities are actually offering programs as well. Just waiting for my computer to catch up here. E-waste, when we talk about e-waste, universal waste, hazardous waste, oftentimes they're interchangeable. They include a number of different products from electronics, light bulbs, batteries, pesticides, cleaning products, medications. We kind of lump a lot of this together into what the household hazardous waste facilities can collect, and just making sure that these materials don't end up in our trash can or our recycle can, because basically all of these materials are things that should not be placed into your trash or your recycle bins, but disposed properly through either an HHW, household hazardous waste drop-off facility, through some of the door-to-door collection programs that are available in the county, and through a number of the local hauler programs. So I'm going to show you the website in a little bit, but basically in the county there are programs for all of these materials that you can do at your door special collections. There are permanent drop-off sites that are available Thursday through Saturday. There's also drop-off events that are on rotating locations and schedules throughout the county. Many of the cities have door-to-door used oil collection. There's also paint care, where you can log in and put in your zip code and find out a paint store that will accept your paint for free. And then there's a number of retail sites now that are also offering drop-off of things like light bulbs and rechargeable batteries. So many programs operating in the county. And the goal ultimately is to reduce, like we talked about, the pollution. And a big reason is that so much of this pollution ends up in our oceans and stormwater systems. So the littering affects the local stormwater tremendously, and things going into our water system that especially the stormwater drains that go straight to the oceans. These are all things that we want to think about. So when you're changing your oil and you're pouring it down the stormwater drain, it's going to the ocean. So we want to make sure that no pollutants are ending up in the storm drain, doing that through making sure that we clean up pet waste, that we're removing, leaves and things from our lawns so that they don't clog the storm drains, that we're not littering. We can do things in our community like participate in local events. All right, so our last polling question before we move on. Which of the following items have you improperly disposed before? And just be honest. I know that we've all thrown stuff away that we didn't even recognize that it was a pollutant, that it was harmful, or that we didn't know what else to do with it. So having to make that choice more out of necessity than an understanding. So let's share, and I think you can pick anything that applies. I'm going to close that in just a second, so if you haven't voted, and we'll see what are the biggest hard to handle or improperly disposed products. Okay. So it looks like light bulbs and batteries were the two highest. 80% of us have improperly disposed of those. 40% have said e-waste and 20% have said paint. Yeah, huge issues. You think of a small thing like a battery or a light bulb that we often change so frequently in the house, and there's not a lot of really convenient, easy systems to get rid of those. So I will talk about some of those a little bit in the wrap-up on the website, how you can find out more information on how to get rid of those. All right, so here's my contact information if you have any questions. And excuse me, sorry about that. I've had that horrible thing going on lately. So if solid waste, recycling, composting, things like that are something that you have a huge interest in or you'd like to learn more about, we have another class that's going to be coming up, which is our Master Compost and Solid Waste course. That course will start February 9th, 2016. It also goes 8 consecutive weeks from 6 to 9 p.m. And Joe Lees is our instructor. And again, you can go to the website and sign up for that class. Okay, so we are going to transition to our next speaker. And I'm going to make sure, give me 1 second while I make sure that she's on. Okay, she is on. So I'm going to go ahead and, Andre, are you there?
I'm here.
Great. Do you have the presentation on your computer that you want to do from your computer, or do you want to do it from mine?
I'm doing it from yours is just fine.
Okay, so let me get on here. I have to go open up a new presentation. My computer's been a little bit slow, so I apologize if this takes a minute. While my computer is trying to move to the other presentation, I'm going to go ahead and introduce Andre Johnson is the Water Resource Specialist for the Bay Area Water Supply and Conservation Agency, BOSCA, which comprises the 26 utilities that purchase water from the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission for resale to their local service areas. Ms. Johnson manages the development and implementation of BOSCA's regional water conservation and public education programs. She coordinates their drought response efforts to assist member agencies in meeting their water use reduction targets, including the regional drought messaging campaign. She also leads the development of the regional demand and conservation saving projections with BOSCA and prepares the annual survey documenting water use and demographics among the agencies. She has a bachelor's in geography and environmental studies from University of California, Los Angeles. So welcome, Andre. I'm going to go ahead and switch over to your presentation. So just give me 1 second. And I think we're ready for you. Oh, sorry, it still says Kyle's name on there. I apologize for that.
That's fine. Kyle's cooler than I am, so sorry you're stuck with me today. But thank you for having me, for being here this afternoon. Next slide is fine. So I'm going to give you just a general overview of our water today, starting with our water supply, where it comes from, and then going into the drought, what exactly the drought means for both the state and for us locally. And last but certainly not least, I'm going to cover some of the easy and more complicated steps that you can take to conserve water and some of the programs that we offer to help you do that. Next. As Judy mentioned, BOSCA is a special district that represents 26 water suppliers in San Mateo, Santa Clara, and Alameda counties. We cover the majority of San Mateo County, although there are portions of the west side of the county that are outside of our service area. But in total, our service area covers 1.7 million residents and nearly 40,000 businesses, all of whom rely on the San Francisco regional water system for at least a portion of their water supply. Next. An overview of the San Francisco regional water system, or the Hetch Hetchy regional water system as you may know it. But here about 85% of the water from the system comes from what we call upcountry, which is the Hetch Hetchy Reservoir located in Yosemite Park actually. Only about 15% of our water supply comes from our local watershed sources, so Crystal Springs Reservoir and the local runoff that we get into our local sources. We are heavily dependent on the Hetch Hetchy system for our supply, and so we've really been tracking the snowpack lately, and pleased to say this is the first year in quite a few years where we are actually doing okay to date on precipitation and snowpack. Next slide. Just an overview of our member agencies. We have some very large agencies in our service area and some smaller agencies. And do want to point out that water supply sources do vary within each of our individual member agencies. Some are entirely dependent on the San Francisco regional water system, and some have other local or imported supplies available to them. For example, some agencies have recycled water or some local groundwater. Next. One thing that we can say for our overall service area and that we are very proud of is that per person water use within our service area has been steadily decreasing, not just during the current drought, but really for the past 30 years. At its peak, gross per capita water use for the Bosque service area, which is the total amount of water used in our service area divided by total number of people, was at 185 gallons per person per day. In 2014, that was down to 124 gallons per person per day. Similarly, we also look at residential per capita water use, which is total water used by residential customers divided by population. At its peak, residential water use was at 104 gallons per person per day, and that was down to 77 gallons per person per day in 2014. You may notice that it looks like gross per capita water use has decreased more significantly than residential. And that is largely because of the changes we've seen in this region in the past 30 years, whereas in 1986 there was still more industry here, manufacturing and other water-intensive industries. A lot of those have moved out, and we've got more commercial buildings now, which is the reason that the gross per capita has decreased more quickly than residential. But overall, we are using 10% less water today in our service area, despite the fact that our population has grown by 25% since 1986. And I will tell you that these are actually pre-drought numbers. Our numbers for the past year and a half, with all of the extraordinary conservation efforts that have been taken by all of you, are even lower than this. Next slide. As I'm sure you've all heard, California is in a drought, and we have seen some unprecedented actions by the state in response to this drought. The State Water Board has passed the first mandatory urban water use limits in the state's history, calling for a 25% reduction in water use statewide. Next. Really, the primary reason for the state's actions was snowpack this year. As of April 1st, 2015, snowpack at the 100 stations for which readings were taken throughout the state was at 5% of the average for that time of year. Looking at this graph, which shows snowpack over the past 10 years, you can see that some years snowpack is above average, above that blue line. Some years it's below, but over the long run, you tend to see wet years followed by dry years, and it balances out so that the state's reservoirs are able to refill. Looking at 2012 through 2014, we had 3 really dry years in a row, and 2015 was unprecedented in being at 5% of normal. And we really rely on the snowpack for it's nature's reservoir for us. As the snow melts, it provides water supply to the state's communities and refills the storage throughout the state. So as I mentioned, the overall statewide water use reduction target was set at 25%. But in figuring out how to achieve that overall 25% target, the state board assigned each water supplier an individual conservation standard, as they call it, or water use reduction goals, another way to put it. And they determined each agency's water use reduction goal based upon its residential per capita use. The conservation standards for the BOSCA member agencies vary from 8% to 36%, just depending on how much water a given community was using before the drought. You can see we have a lot of agencies in that 8% conservation standard range. And that's because there are a lot of communities within San Mateo County that were already really efficient. In particular, communities like Daly City, where there are smaller lot sizes, typically cooler weather. Some of these communities were already using very little water, so they didn't have much room to reduce. On the other side, in the 36% range, when you've got communities like Hillsborough, where there are warmer temperatures and much larger lots, there was greater potential for these communities to reduce their water use. Next slide. The state's emergency conservation regulation included some prohibited uses of water for all communities throughout the state. And many of these are things that were already prohibited by individual communities within San Mateo County. Some of these are things like using potable water to wash your sidewalks or driveways, allowing runoff, water running off of your property while you're irrigating, using a hose to wash a car without a shutoff nozzle, using potable water in decorative water features that don't recirculate, irrigating or watering your lawn or your plants during or within 48 hours of measurable precipitation, using water to irrigate, using potable water to irrigate turf on street medians, and using water to irrigate landscapes of new homes or buildings inconsistent with the building code requirements. Many of these are things that were already not allowed within specific communities, but these are now statewide restrictions. And for businesses, restaurants are prohibited from serving water to customers unless it's requested, and hotels and motels must provide guests with the option of not having their linens and towels laundered daily. Next, please. So as far as what individuals can do to conserve water, FOSCA and its member agencies offer a variety of programs to help customers to reduce their water use. And these programs include rebates for water-efficient devices and fixtures, education programs, and best of all, free stuff, free shower heads, faucet aerators, and other small water-efficient fixtures that can actually make a huge difference in reducing your use. When looking at ways to conserve, it's important to look both inside and outside the home. In prior droughts, there was a huge focus on reducing indoor water use. And the result of that is that indoor water use is already significantly lower than it was 20 years ago. This drought, really, we're seeing a huge focus on reducing outdoor water use. And in particular, looking at our landscaping and what options there are for having beautiful, sustainable landscapes that are not water intensive. Next. So we have a polling question for you. What do you think is the single largest source of water use within a typical single-family home here in San Mateo?
The poll is launched, so they're answering right now, Andre.
Okay, perfect.
I'll give them a few more seconds, and then I don't know if you can see the answers on your screen, so I'll read them off to you. Have you been able to see the other answers when they come up? Okay, I'm going to close this one. I'll let you can let me know. Can you see the responses?
Oh, now I can, yes.
Okay. So 50% said landscaping and 50% said showers.
Okay. Well, landscaping is, without a doubt, the single biggest water use within most single-family homes throughout the state. It accounts for approximately 50%, give or take, depending on the community, of a household's total water use. I will say that showers was a good guess for if you're looking at indoor use only. You find that within this community, showers are the single biggest indoor water user. Right up there, almost on par with toilets and faucets. Those three they take the cake for the indoors, as this graph shows. This, interestingly, for a long time, when you would look at biggest water users inside the home, the answer was unquestionably toilets. However, toilets have become much more efficient over the last 20 years. Previously, most toilets used 3.5 to 5 gallons per flush, and most of the toilets on the market now use 1.28 gallons per flush or less. In fact, as of January 2014, toilets that use more than 1.28 gallons per flush cannot be sold in California. So we've seen most households, as their toilets break or as they've taken advantage of rebate programs no longer have the really high water use toilets. So given that showers are the single biggest water user within the home, a very easy step that you can take to reduce your water use is to make sure that you have a low-flow shower head installed. Standard shower heads use between 5 and 8 gallons per minute. Low-flow options use 1.5 to 2 gallons per minute. There are quite a few really nice WaterSense certified shower heads available on the market right now. And depending on which community you're in, your water agency may be able to provide you with one. If you're not sure if your shower is using a low-flow shower head or not, there's a simple test you can do to determine. You simply would take a gallon container, hold it under the shower head, and clock the time it takes to fill. So if your shower, if it fills your container in 15 seconds, then you know that your flow rate is 4 gallons per minute. Another huge water user indoors are faucets. And you can reduce the water use of your faucet simply by changing out the faucet aerator, which is the small mesh part that you can feel at the bottom of your tap if you were to touch your faucet. Standard aerators use 2.2 gallons per minute. Water efficient models for the kitchen use 1.8 gallons per minute or less, and for the bathroom they use 1.2 gallons per minute or less. And again, many water agencies can provide you with free faucet aerators upon request. Toilets are another huge water user, and the biggest water using toilet is a leaky toilet. Your water use can skyrocket if you have a toilet leak, and sometimes it's very hard to tell as the leaks appear to be slow, but over the course of a day, that's a lot of gallons of water being wasted. There is a really simple way to check for leaks within your toilet. You can take either a dye tab that you can get from your water agency, or alternately just a few drops of food coloring. Flush your toilet and then put the food coloring or dye tab in your toilet tank in the back, and then just wait. If you come back in 20 minutes and the water in your toilet bowl is blue, then you know you have a leak. And you can usually fix leaks by just purchasing a new fill valve and flapper replacement kit for very cheap at Home Depot or a local hardware store. There are videos on YouTube instructing you on how you can fix your toilet yourself. If you are one of those households that has an old school toilet that uses a lot of water, there are still some out there. Now is a really great time to take advantage of rebate programs offered by BOSCA and participating member agencies and to replace your toilet with a water efficient model. We are currently offering rebates of up to $125 per toilet if you replace a toilet that uses 1.6 gallons per flush or more with a WaterSense certified premium toilet. And the premium toilets are ones that use 1.06 gallons per flush or less. If you don't want to go for a premium model, but you would like to still take advantage of the program and replace your toilet with a standard HET, you can qualify for a rebate of $75 per toilet. Next. Next, please. We can skip this one. Just to clarify what a premium HET is, it's a relatively new term to most people, but these are toilets that flush with no more than 1.06 gallons, and they're also certified to remove at least 600 grams of waste per flush. You may have seen some toilets in the last 10 years that were considered low-flow toilets but didn't seem to really work very well, and it doesn't save any water if people are flushing twice. The MAP premium toilets have been certified to be effective in addition to water efficient. Next. We can skip this one. Next, please. Another great option for saving both water and energy is to upgrade your clothes washer. Through a partnership with PG&E, BOSCA, and participating member agencies, offer a combined water and energy rebate if you purchase a qualifying Energy Star most efficient washing machine. Right now, the water agency rebate is $100 and the PG&E rebate is $50, and you can apply online and through a single application and receive one check from both. Next. So now that we've covered indoors, I do want to get into some simple steps you can take to save water outside. Most of these are, at this point, requirements by the state regulations, but when you're cleaning your sidewalks and pavements, use a broom instead of a hose, and make sure that you have a hose nozzle with an automatic shutoff installed when you are using your hose. Next. Also, important to water lawns and plants only at night or in the early morning before dawn. This reduces the water that is lost to evaporation. Most communities have designated hours during which you can water, so you can check with your local water supplier. But typically, watering is allowed between like 8 p.m. and 8 a.m., somewhere in that range. It's also important to test your soil before you water and make sure that you actually need to water instead of just watching a calendar. There are cheap soil moisture meters that you can purchase, or if you don't have a moisture meter, you can just stick your finger into the soil, and if the top 2 inches feel damp, you don't need to water yet. Typically, agencies in this area have adopted a 2-day per week maximum for watering your landscaping during the drought. However, it's the rainy season. Even with the precipitation we've received today, that's enough that watering is not allowed for the next 48 hours. And this is a great time of year to check your irrigation timers and just turn them off for the winter. With the winter precipitation, supplementing with additional irrigation is likely not necessary on a regular basis. Most communities within San Mateo County have a consistent irrigation schedule, so if you're wondering when you're allowed to water your landscaping, odd addresses are allowed to irrigate in most communities on Mondays and Thursdays, even addresses on Tuesdays and Fridays, but please do check with your local water supplier. We also have quite a few other resources available for you. There is the BayAreaGardening.org website, which provides an abundance of guidance for how to garden beautifully while saving water. There are plant galleries and land garden galleries where you can view other gardens, find plants that you like or ideas that you like, and then tag them. You can search for plants based on water use, plant type, size, shading to help plan your project, and get tips for how to manage your sustainable garden. If you are looking to upgrade your landscaping and to replace the lawn that you've let die during the drought with something that's more long-term sustainable, our Lawn Be Gone program is a great way to do that. FOSCA and participating agencies offer rebates to customers for replacing lawns with drought-tolerant landscaping. Rebate amounts vary from $1 to $4 per square feet. Next. We also offer rebates in partnership with the San Mateo County-wide Water Pollution Prevention Program for rain barrels. And this is a perfect time of year to install a rain barrel because we're actually getting rain. You can get up to $100 back per 50 gallons of storage capacity that you install, or up to the total cost of the rain barrel, whichever is less. $50 of that comes from your local water agency, 50% from San Mateo County. And this is a great way to take advantage of the rain that we're getting right now and use that rainwater to supplement your landscaping when we have those dry weeks throughout the winter. Also, important to check for leaks, both inside the house and within your landscaping. Leaks can be a huge water waster. There are quite a few resources online that can show you how to check your water meter for leaks. But I don't want to walk through all of this right now, but feel free to reach out if you need more assistance with that, or I recommend YouTube. There's some very good instructional videos. Also do want to touch on Cal Water's residential conservation programs, as Cal Water does cover a large portion of San Mateo County, and they offer programs separate from the FOSCA programs. They have rebates for high-efficiency toilets and clothes washers, smart irrigation controllers, water use efficiency evaluations if you would like some assistance in figuring out how to make your home more efficient, free sprinkler nozzle rebates, a turf removal rebate program, and home conservation kits with items like shower heads and faucet aerators. Bosca also offers some education programs to help customers who are looking to be more efficient and looking for some assistance in doing so. In particular, we offer our free landscape education classes in the spring and fall of each year. These classes are designed to introduce homeowners and others to concepts of water efficient and sustainable landscaping. We have topics on alternatives to lawn. We have classes on gray water and rainwater harvesting. We have classes on water efficient irrigation practices. Our class schedule will probably be posted end of January with classes beginning late February for our spring season, so we urge you to check our website. And this is just a reminder of the BayAreaGardening.org website for also assisting you in planning your garden project. One last thing I do want to remind everyone of is while conservation has been on the forefront of everyone's minds recently during the drought, this is not just a drought issue. Water conservation is a long-term effort with major community benefits in various areas. It increases our water system reliability. As we're using our supplies more efficiently, we have more supplies available in the long term when we need it. It's a good solution to help meet the planned needs of a community. As I mentioned, we've been able to grow significantly over the past 30 years while still reducing our water use. It saves you money, both on your water bill and on your energy bill, promotes efficient use of our resources, and benefits the environment and community sustainability. If you have any additional questions or are interested in finding out more about any of our programs, I urge you to visit our website or feel free to contact me.
All right. Thanks, Andre, for the great presentation. We're just about out of time, so I wanted to do a couple things for a wrap up. First of all, I wanted to thank both Jackie and Andre and Insu for being on the call with us. All three of them, we have their information posted on the screen, but we can connect you to any of the people that were on the call today if you'd like to find out more information. I'm going to launch a quick poll. I don't know if it'll let me switch over to the website while I do that, but we want to get some information on more information that would be valuable to you in the future. And I'm going to try and quickly switch over to the website and show you where you can access more information. I did want to let everybody know that as soon as this webinar ends, that there's a poll that will pop up just asking you to provide some quick feedback about the presentation and the what additional information or other programs that you'd be interested in. But quickly, I wanted to let everybody know about Recycleworks.org, the website. There's a ton of information on this website and I think you guys cannot see, okay, you should be able to see my screen now. So if you go to Recycleworks.org, we had talked about being able to sign up for the classes. So if you go up here where it says on the upper right under Sustainability Volunteer Academy, you can actually click there and find out about all of our upcoming classes, and you can sign up for them. If you're interested in finding out about your haulers programs that are available through home or through school, you can actually see under the Reduce, Reuse, Recycle to the left, at school, at work, at home. So for instance, you could click on the at home, and this is where you'll find all the information about your waste haulers. So you can click on the hauler map, you can find hauler contacts, it gives you access to the waste hauler websites. The other thing that's really important that I think we recognize that proper disposal of materials was sometimes challenging, you can click on the hazardous waste section, and this is a great section that has a ton of information about how you can sign up for door-to-door collection, when the events are, what materials are accepted, and some of the other types of programs that are available. So this is really a one-stop sort of resource for tons of information in addition to all the other websites that we provided you. So make sure that you take a look at those. And then as I'm signing off, let me make sure, I wanted to also let you know about a couple more classes, and I'm going to go through these slides quickly. Again, we have the Master Resource Conservation 8-week course starting January 20th, which will definitely talk about energy and water and resource conservation. We have the Compost and Solid Waste course, which will start on February 9th. That's heavily focused on composting and vermicomposting. It's a very hands-on class. We also have two great workshops that are very exciting. The Green Building and Water Conservation, which will give you a lot more tips on implementing and installing some of these systems, as well as looking at some of the business systems that have installed. That's on March 26th. And then we have the Green Business Workshop, which will help businesses with getting certified as a green business, and that will be on May 28th. So these courses and everything that we offer, you can both find out more information and sign up on recycleworks.org. So we already asked the polling question. I just want to say thank you to everybody for attending. If you do have any more questions or you need more feedback, please contact Sue. Her information is up here on the website, and her information is also on the recycleworks.org website. So thank you very much for attending this webinar. I hope that it was useful to you, and we really look forward to you participating in some of our upcoming courses.